All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Autodesk Virtual Academy, KETIV's once a week learning webinar, all about the product design and manufacturing collection for all of our customers and everyone else throughout the world. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. So you might be wondering, hey, I saw a different topic today. What's going on here, and why do you guys have 5 people on cameras? So we decided to do a little bit of a different webinar today. So working from home has been increasingly common speech over, I guess, the last couple of days, maybe the last couple of weeks or so, as the entire world is dealing with what we're all dealing with. And working from home presents itself with a couple of unique challenges, right? And our customers have been calling us pretty nonstop about how do we do this? How do we work from home effectively? Some of the questions that we've been getting are the following, right? So one, how do I access my software from my house? I don't have my computer with me at home, or maybe I have a laptop with me, different one than I use at the office. How do I work? Two, how do I access my data, whether it's vaulted or on a network drive stuck at the office? How do I get that information at my house or maybe my home office? And three, we have meetings all the time face to face. How do we effectively communicate and notify each other of the work that we're doing and how that all works within the organization? These are a couple of the questions that we've been getting pretty nonstop over the last couple of days. And we want to make sure that, hey, everyone gets these answers because it is pretty much affecting all of us at this point. So for those reasons, we've decided to host this webinar and address some of those too. So as you can see, there's like a number of us here on the webinar today, and we're all remote as well. So I wanted to definitely address that. We're all definitely not in the studio at the office, a little bit different than usual. So let me go ahead and introduce you to the team that's on with us today. First off, I've got myself, Nigel Mbayek, one of the customer success managers here at KETIV Technologies, and your host for today's AVA and all the other AVAs pretty much. So definitely happy to be here today. Second, for the second week in a row, we've got Jose Paredes Clara here. Jose, how's it going?
It's going all right. Just working from home here. Glad to be back 2 weeks in a row.
Absolutely. So Jose is one of our in-house vault experts, and he's going to be able to clarify how to be able to get some of that data that is so precious to your organization to your home computer if you're away from the office per se. We've also got Javier Chavez.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Hey, Jav. Javier is one of the senior application engineers here on KETIV team. He has a lot of the information that you guys will need to be able to optimize some of those remote workflows, working offline, all of that stuff. Javier is the go-to guy for that. If you got questions, he's one of the guys with the answers. Adam Evangelista, one of my good friends here at the office too, one of our application engineers who works predominantly on our customer success team at KETIV. If you've called in for support before, odds are probably gotten Adam as one of the AEs to help you on that. Adam's going to go over some of the communication challenges that we have seen, as well that we've overcome here as well at KETIV by having us all working separately from each other. Adam, how's it going?
I'm not too bad, man. Feet are really cold, but it's all right.
Absolutely. Last but not least, we've got Stacy Menson, our director of marketing. Hey, Stacy, good morning. How's it going?
Good morning. It's going well.
Awesome, great to hear. So Stacy, she has all of the relevant information surrounding these topics that's available from us as well as Autodesk. So she is, like, I'd say, the librarian for all of the information. If you need something, Stacy probably knows where it is. And so we'll be able to answer any questions you guys have, hopefully, with the 5 of us here today. Today we've got over 100 people online, so definitely hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. We figured this is going to be a pretty popular topic. Seems like it is. So with that, let's go ahead and start moving through this PowerPoint here. So like I said, topic today, working from home. And this is what we're going to be going over today. Introductions, pretty much done that already. Software accessibility. How do you access your software wherever you are? Accessing your organization's internal data. My friend Jose is going to go over that. Optimizing some of those remote workflows. Like I said, Javier will be taking care of that for us. Maintaining effective communication. We're communicating right now. How do we maintain that? Adam's going to go over that. Last but not least is the area in which all of you attending the webinar today get to participate and you get your questions answered, Q&A. Definitely Happy to answer and field any questions during the webinar as well. So get those things typed in and we'll go ahead and address those as we move through here.
And I'll add something real quick to that, Nigel, is, even if it's not necessarily related to this, go ahead and throw those questions in there. We might not answer it immediately, but let us know what some of your needs are in terms of working from home, or anything that we can help with. Go ahead and feel free to put some of those in there as well.
So let's go ahead and move on to the first section here, all about accessing your software. All right, so software access, right? And this is where Nigel gets to present something for once. Usually I'm just here hosting and I got, a friend with me going through that. But today, I want to go over this section, really important. It's relevant for everybody, is how do I access my software at home? There's two major methods in which you can access your software at home. The first one is home use licensing, right? So Autodesk, with current subscription, you have the ability to have a second installation of the software at your house. And the way that works is based on this chart on the left, which I'll be going over a little bit more detail moving forward. Essentially, based on the type of licensing you have, determines the way that you get your home use licensing. The second is if you have access to it, right? And Jose will go over a little bit more detail on how this works later, is to remote desktop right onto your computer at the office, right? Whether that's you use RDP or you use something like TeamViewer or something from another third-party software company to be able to remote into the computer you use at work and use the software on that computer. Kind of inception, I would say. So on the next slide, let's go ahead and answer this first question, which is, what kind of licensing do I have? And thanks again, Adam. Adam created a really awesome blog post for all of this. If you haven't seen it already, that's available on our website. And this is one really prominent section of that, is how do I check what kind of licensing I have? So in your Autodesk application, if you have access to the one you have at work, or maybe you're still at work, there is a question mark in the top right-hand side of the application. That is the help menu, but immediately to the right of that is a drop-down arrow. And that drop-down arrow will bring that menu that Hub is highlighting right now. And at the bottom of that menu is a section that says About, and then whatever product you have open. So whether it's Inventor, AutoCAD, Vault, etc., go ahead and click that button. Then we'll move over to the screenshot there on the bottom. That'll open that dialog box. It'll tell you what version you have, and that's really important too, because you want to install the same version at home that you have in the office, which is there, as well as if you have any service packs and updates and things along those lines. But most importantly is the product information button, which is in the bottom right-hand corner. If you click that, it'll open the screenshot there on the top right, and that'll show you everything you need to know about your license, right? Your serial number, if you need that, the type of license that you have, and that's extendable. Maybe it'll say network, and then license expiration date. It might also have that end date as well. So keep that in mind. That's how you figure out what kind of license you have. And the next slide is where you use that information to be able to determine how you get your home use license. So let's start on the left here. If you have single user sign-on licenses, you simply go into your Autodesk account, download and install it identically as you did in your home or as in your work computer. It's the exact same process. You install it, you sign in, and you can use your application, much like you are at your office. If you have network licensing, and a lot of our customers do, essentially that's multi-user licensing. You take a license from the network pool, which is generally on a server, and you use it, right? And when those licenses are not available, you can't get a license. But how do you use that from home if you don't necessarily have access to the network? Well, there's an option in there called license borrow. And there's a lot of documentation about what that looks like. Essentially, you use the borrow license, which is in the same dialog as the about that we had earlier, and you borrow that license for a period of time. Now, if you don't borrow it for a period of time, the default is quite lengthy, so definitely keep in mind about that. You can also limit the amount of borrow time or who can borrow via an options file on your license file.
So real quick, Nigel, with the single sign-on, that's a relatively new option, correct? And that seems to me like it has the most flexibility.
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. And so it has the most flexibility. It's the simplest in terms of signing on for a second or a third instance again. Essentially, just use your username, and you log into the application and start using it.
Yeah, I like that.
And yeah, and just to add on that as well, a lot of our customers have been getting emails about switching over from network licensing over to single sign-on. I know Autodesk is trying to move towards that model for licensing. So, with it being simpler and making it easier to work from home, it might be a good idea to do that at this point.
Yep, it makes it super, super easy. And if you're one of the people who are still on current maintenance, right, you pay for your maintenance every year for your perpetual license. What you do is you request from Autodesk a second serial number for a home use license. And that can be, it's a simple Google search. There's a lot of blog posts about it. If you need help finding that, let us know and we'll be able to walk you through that process as well. That's pretty much everything you need to know on home use licensing. If you need to know the specifics, definitely reach out to our Lifeline team or see Adam's blog post that he put on our website. That's ketiv.com/blog, I believe. And you'll be able to see that blog post. With that, let's move on to connecting to the data.
All right, thanks, Nigel. Yeah, so now that we know the way that we're going to access our CAD software, Nigel mentioned a couple of ways, whether it be through remote desktop connection or even a laptop that you have at home. We need access to your company's design data next. That's the next important part that we think here at KETIV is necessary. The reason you want to do this is, you may have access to your CAD software, but the things that you'll be working on, whether it be CAD files or whether it be PDFs, Word documents, that's all probably still hosted at the office on a server somewhere. In 99% of the cases, no one can really access those from outside of the office just because you need to be on a network. That's where VPNs come into play here. So as you can see on the diagram on the right-hand side here, what a VPN allows us to do is to install a piece of software, have some credentials, get them from IT. You'll need your IT's help to see if this is even possible or to get this started in the first place. But you'll use credentials to log into a VPN, which then allows you access through your company's firewall into the network. Once on the network, then you have access to all these files, whether they be hosted on a network drive, your P drive, your G drive, something that you're accustomed to, or if you're working in Vault. That's a big one there. Once you're on the network, you're able to, log into Vault normally, download your files normally, and work in an environment that you're accustomed to. Like Nigel mentioned earlier, there are a couple of ways that you can do this. One would be, one would be through VPN, accessing your software on your laptop at home, and opening up Inventor, Vault, what have you there. The other option that he mentioned is actually a remote machine, or on-premise machine here. And this machine itself could be the machine that you sit at when you're, at the office. It could be the very same one. In a lot of cases, it's actually a desktop, so it's kind of hard to bring that home with you. So, you're going to go ahead and remote directly into that machine. You're going to be sending pics and clicks through the internet to it, and then you'll have access to all the CAD software that you had before, so you don't have to worry about reinstalling things. We here at KETIV, through some discussions, feel that this is actually the simplest and the best way to work from home if you have access to that on-premise machine. We'll go over Hav will actually go over some issues with accessing files that might be hosted on your network, and some ways that we can address that as well. And then the last thing here we want to talk about is with VPN, we want to make sure that it's optimized for your location. We want to make sure that if you have offices in California, Ohio, and New York, you can have multiple VPNs set up for each office, but you want to make sure you're not using the New York VPN while you're in California. It just makes it the performance a little less impressive there. So on this next slide, we're going to actually see some cloud solutions that you can use without VPN. And then the first thing you'll see here is Fusion Lifecycle. So Fusion Lifecycle actually addresses the process portion of, within a company. What we like to see is interaction between different departments, such as like we are right now, where we're working with marketing and engineering at the same time. Fusion Lifecycle alleviates that pressure of how do I do this amongst my whole company? Whether it be ECOs or new products you're trying to get out to market, through Fusion Lifecycle, you're able to use this tenant on the cloud and actually have every person from the department work on the same files and the same process. The other option that we have here, and we mentioned, working with Vault on the cloud, that allows us to host a server on a cloud service, whether it be Azure or Amazon Web Server, and build what's called a virtual machine. That means you don't have to worry about hardware. You don't have to worry about actually buying a box or hard drives. You still need to maintain it, but you don't have to, there's no added step there. What this allows you to do by hosting Vault on the cloud is, let's go back to the 3 offices we talked about, California, Ohio, and New York. If the server is hosted on the cloud, then all 3 offices can actually access the Vault from their native offices without having to use a VPN. Again, that's an added benefit of it being on the cloud. We actually have some customers that are currently hosting a Vault on the cloud just for this reason. They are spread across the country, and it makes it a lot easier for them to work together in Vault. And then the last part here that we'll see on the next slide is actually Fusion Team. What Fusion Team alleviates here is the sharing of files. As you can see in the diagram on the right, we have customers, whether it be you have your supply chain, you have some contractors, all these people that may need access to your files, but you don't want them to have access to your network. Well, Fusion Team alleviates that by having you upload files specifically to the cloud, and having the customers be able to, access them. In its entirety, there is in its basic function, there is no version control of these files. So you'll have to control those manually. But in a little bit, Javier will actually go through how Fusion Team works with Vault and how we can integrate those 2 tools together. And I know we have a lot of attendees here today. I know some of you are in the AEC business here. So I'm gonna have Javier talk about how the AEC community can actually work within the cloud as well as the manufacturing side.
And really quick too, before we move on to some of the BIM stuff, is with Fusion Team, I know a lot of people that I have talked to, customers, ask me, hey, is it the same thing as like Dropbox or Google Drive or OneDrive or any of those things? It's very similar. The concept is the same, right? You've got a drive that exists on the cloud that you can sync your desktop to, but it is what I like to call CAD aware. It understands that CAD files are linked to other CAD files, right? As opposed to something like Dropbox, where it doesn't understand that, say, for example, a part file is a part of an assembly file. So the assembly file needs to know where the part file exists to be able to access it. Same thing with the drawings, XREFs for AutoCAD, things along those lines that maybe OneDrive won't pick up. Something like Fusion Team understands those links between CAD files.
Excellent. So yeah, it is a cloud-based tool. And most of the time, like we said, we talk about, when we talk about these tools, we talk about collaborating with, people outside of the organization. And so there is, a AEC version of this. It's BIM 360. And likewise, it's not just for the people outside of your organization, your customers, suppliers, and so on. It's also for us. We're the ones uploading that data. And in an instance like this, it makes sense for us to utilize it almost the same way as our customers, right? We download the data, we edit it, we put it back. So it's a good way to collaborate. Now, I don't necessarily recommend putting all your data there, but maybe you can sort of silo the project you're currently working on, put it there, and have users access it remotely without a VPN, download it from the cloud, and collaborate that way. Okay. The unique thing is between the two, right? Fusion Team is geared a little bit more towards the manufacturing sector, and AEC, again, architectural engineering and construction. So the interesting thing about AEC is they are so much more document-based than manufacturing. It's all about the documents, creating drawings, a set of drawings. That's the most important part. Sometimes those drawings are PDFs, sometimes they're DWG files, sometimes they are Revit files. And the interesting thing, it is CAD aware. It knows, when you're in this industry, the sheets are everything. So when you upload these, it has a way of recognizing, identifying metadata that's important to users, like the sheet number, the project number. It identifies the title blocks. You go through a process to do that. So it is CAD aware, and it's very effective to be able to navigate through those files that way. And Team is, again, more centric towards the manufacturing sector and has some advantages that way, right? So with that said, right, let's start talking about optimization of your tools while working remotely, right? And we're addressing a lot of Vault customers, right? And the majority of our customers are using Vault. And they do this, for, three main reasons. It's one place to keep all your data, one version of the truth. So you go there when you want to get the latest version of anything, right? A part, a drawing, even an Excel file. It allows for better tracking of your change history. We want to know who made this change and when they did it. And so it allows us to track those types of things. And last but not least, this is probably the most important to us, is it localizes our files for better performance, okay? So with that said, we want to talk about the challenges and the risks associated with working in a remote, VPN environment, right? The first one's really obvious. Simply having a slow connection is going to make the experience not the same, right? It's going to degrade the experience that you normally have with your files, okay? And as a result, you might have, things like disrupted connections to your files. And, one of the things we said you could do is with a VPN, you could access these files directly. If you're not using Vault and you're just saving files to a server, potentially, this will allow you to open up these files directly. But there's a risk you take in that when you do this, those disruptions in the connection to your network will sometimes cause files to corrupt. So that's why Vault is, I think, a really big advantage, because when you're working with Vault, you're copying these files to your hard drive. And the only, connection you need is really during that time that you're copying files to your hard drive so that you can work on them locally. With that said, we want to talk about how you prepare for this. And so you definitely want to prepare by doing a couple things. Before you even start working with Vault, remotely or Inventor remotely, you want to make sure that you localize your templates and design data. So you could see, in the project file, you're going to have to go there and update these locations that are normally pointing to a drive for your templates. If you don't do that, you're going to click new and it's going to say, it's going to have a hard time finding these, or if you're, maybe currently disconnected, you're not going to be able to get these at all, right? So it's going to keep, that signal or that tracking back to the network. You're going to keep doing that. It's just going to slow things down. So localizing them will speed things up significantly. So we'll make those changes, correct those file paths and be on our way. Now to actually work online, right? We have a really simple strategy, which is to log into Vault like you normally do. This is going to take a little bit longer, right? So you'll know right away that you're on VPN and you're accessing this over the wide area network as opposed to local. You're going to go ahead and check out your files like you normally do. The only thing is you're going to want to consider every single file that you may possibly need to use for the day. Okay, no more, no less. Now, if you do know you're going to be using a PVC fitting, you just don't know what size, maybe it makes sense to get a copy of the entire library locally. So when you're doing this checkout or getting process, get all the files you may need, and in some cases, maybe get an entire library. This is what's going to take the longest, is copying these files and downloading them, okay? So you're going to do this and then log out, okay? Logging out keeps your Vault add-in or your Vault client right? Disconnected from the network, and it's not constantly looking back to see what the status of these files are. Are they still checked out? Has somebody else checked them out? You're going to want to disconnect, and you're going to be a little bit less informed, but your performance will increase. Okay, and then you'll go about doing your work. Okay, if you need, to check out another file, guess what? You're going to have to log in, check out another file, and log back out again. Do that quickly, and you'll, reserve those times where you need to communicate with the server to just checking in and checking out. Okay, that should help with your experience. And just basically, it'll be kind of like having your own personal copy of a file, making your changes, and going back to work and putting them back, except you're doing it over VPN. So the challenge is going to be over, if you have typically like a big project that you're working on, takes months or maybe weeks or whatever, is keeping your local files up to date, especially if you're collaborating with other users. Those other users might be making updates or changes to the files you're working on. You want to get those updated files. So it's not uncommon for us to, do this. And what we normally tell customers in a normal environment is, as you're checking in files, clean up your workspace, get rid of all the files so that you're forced to get fresh new files the next day when you come in or the next time you access a design. The exception to this is working from home, okay? We want to avoid having to re-download the same files even though they haven't changed. So instead, you're going to want to synchronize your files and keep them up to date. So a simple way to do this is the process we go through. In your client, you'll be able to see which files are out of date. You can see those little red symbols. You can right-click on them and get the latest versions, right? Now, you're going to have to hunt and pick and find these files. You might be able to find filters that allow you to find these quicker. You could do it through your Vault add-in and update these. But again, you're being forced to go look for these files. So there's some better ways to do this. You might want to do this as soon as you log in the morning, is utilize the workspace sync tool inside of Vault. Okay, so this tool, what it does is it, instead of just looking for one design or one file or one part and updating it, it wants to update your entire workspace, all the files that live in your, your workspace that normally, copies from Vault and copies to your local station. So it does that, and it gives you some ways to manage that, some settings to basically be able to have control over, how it syncs. And by syncing, I mean, it's going to actually delete files that maybe you haven't touched in a while and clean it up for you. It'll download files that are maybe out of date and refresh them. Okay, so the bracket you have locally didn't have a hole 2 weeks ago, and now it does. You've got the latest version with the hole there. It'll do that for you. Okay, and again, there's some criteria. The only risk involved there is it will delete files. And specifically, if you haven't put a file into the Vault and it's just sitting in your workspace, there's a potential that it might delete it. It might be a prototype, it might be a personal project, but you don't want it deleted. So you could change the settings here so that it won't delete unmanaged files, or maybe put a criteria on what files to delete. That should help with your workspace sync, and it works surprisingly well. The performance is actually pretty darn good when I've used it over VPN. Okay, now you're going to want to log out as soon as you're done with this and work like we said before, disconnected offline. Okay, so when you're working with really large assemblies, that's where, like, working with a VPN in a remote environment where you're remote desktoping into your normal workstation and just controlling the mouse and clicks can really degrade. And that's when you're going to want to have a local version or install of Vault and Inventor. And those large assemblies are going to take even longer to download and copy to your workstation. So you're going to want to automate this. Why do this on your own, on your work time? Why spend the first half hour of your day just downloading and checking out these files? Instead, automate this. Inventor comes with a task scheduler, okay? And you could basically launch it and set it up to do, a number of things. One of them would be maybe some of the things that we talked about here, synchronize file of your files. So within the dialog box, you could set up, how or when you wanted to do this. You can set it up, before an hour before you come into work, 2 hours before you come into work, or start work, I should say, because you're not coming into the office anymore. And you could go ahead and select a file. So a real quick tip: when you do this, you'll be tempted to select and find every single file that you want to update. If you just pick the top level drawing, it'll update or get the latest version of everything connected to it. The assembly, the sub-assemblies, the parts, and get the latest versions. And likewise, we can do something similar with checking out. If every day you're going to be checking out the same files and working on them constantly, why not schedule that at 5 o'clock in the morning every day to check out those files and have that done and ready for you? So that all you have to do is launch Inventor and go. Okay. And likewise, at the very end of the day, create a task that checks in all your files. And one of the settings, one of the guys mentioned here, I think Jose mentioned it, might work for you, is to continue to have those checked out. Check it in, but maintain the checkout status so that I can continue working on these. Okay. So save an hour easy by, scheduling this off hours when you're having dinner, when you're sleeping even, to have this done. This is what takes the most amount of time, when you're working remotely. Okay.
And Hav, you might want to use a combination of both, right? If everyone's scheduling a check-in at the end of the day, you'd still want to schedule a get latest at the beginning of your day, just to make sure that you're capturing everybody's changes at the same time.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. Yeah. So, anyways, so yeah, schedule them during off hours, and there's also an option to edit that task when you see it and have it launch immediately on demand. So it's a lot less work than going to the client and doing this. You could just have it do it in the background. So with that said, what if you don't have VPN and you can't access and get behind the firewall of your organization? So Vault has a tool called Project Sync, and it's a feature that provides file and folder synchronization between Vault and supported Autodesk cloud drives. So Fusion Team being one of those cloud drives, BIM 360 as well. Okay. So this capability basically enables Vault users, so again, somebody on site most likely, to either automatically or manually synchronize these files, your desired files, from a folder in Vault into a folder in the cloud drive. So you're now copying Project A to the cloud, and from there you can share those, typically with customers and a supply chain and things like that. But who's to say we as remote users couldn't access that same cloud, make those edits to the cloud, upload them, and have them sync back to the Vault? We can schedule this on a regular basis. We can create criteria for what files should be synced. But it's another way of getting these files out of Vault onto our local machines where we can work on them effectively and back to the cloud and to the Vault again. So it can be configured a number of ways. If you guys need help with this, let us know. With any of these things, just let us know. We'll be glad to help you, to steer you in the right direction. Okay. So this is another way of, again, collaborating and working remotely with your data. Okay. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Adam, who's going to talk to us a little bit about, just other ways we can maintain contact with the rest of our team.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Javier. Definitely. So, as we've been discussing, right, working from home requires at least a few changes, definitely. And so you're going to see some kind of workflow changes to at least your CAD workflow for sure. But in this particular section of the presentation, I do want to discuss some of the other aspects of regular office life that there are technical solutions for as well. So in particular, one part that I'm sure everyone misses from everyday office life is having organized meetings together, in-person conference room meetings and stuff. And, why do we even care about recreating meetings? Meetings are meant to facilitate discussion and discourse. And usually in some kind of premeditated fashion. And there are a variety of different platforms available. We like Zoom here a lot ourselves, but GoToMeeting, Skype for Business, I'm sure you guys already have some kind of solution there. They all, again, help facilitate some kind of meeting order for you guys. The main kind of points of comparison I like to recommend at this point, though, are just be aware of all the different meeting controls. again, this is supposed to, again, encourage your collaboration, communication with other people. And so for me and the Lifeline team, for example, I'm particularly interested in screen sharing and remote control. How easy is it to do that? How easy is it to ask someone else to do that? Absolutely. Many of these platforms also have screen recording and meeting recordings. So I think someone asked in the Q&A already if this particular webinar is going to be available online for reference later. The answer is yes, absolutely. On some platforms you can record these and use them for later, whatever you may need. And additionally, the audio-visual controls are also particularly important as well, especially for large webinars like this, for example, where you know, you need to be able to mute people if they have their mics on, or maybe they have something inappropriate in their background, anything like that. It's all just extra utility to make sure you guys can minimize distraction and maximize the communication back and forth with the other party. And at this point, since a lot of people are working from home for the first time, it is good to highlight your hardware in particular. Oftentimes your default hardware on your laptop computers are not necessarily the best. My web camera, for example, is located in the hinge of my laptop and produces some really unflattering under chin angles of me when I present and do stuff like this. So I actually have it raised up on a shoebox right now. That, and I also have a regular studio mic as well right now because my regular laptop camera isn't really good. Again, this is all in the name of minimizing distractions and being able to get your message across a lot easier. And if I could get the next slide here, Javier.
Sure.
And so on the other side of meetings, right, meetings are typically meant for organized, premeditated discussion, right? On the other side of things that you may be missing from the regular office environment is going to be more impromptu, instant messaging between your other parties and stuff, right? So walking over to someone else's cubicle, saying hi to someone at the water cooler, in the kitchen, in the bathroom, you know. Instant messaging, I'm assuming most people probably have some kind of instant messaging platform at this point as well. Very similar process, a lot of different platforms are available here. This is actually the transition that we went through over the last couple of years here at KETIV, which is from Trillion to Slack to Microsoft Teams. And again, I believe instant messaging is probably a relatively solved problem in terms of technology at this point. So when you're comparing the different platforms, I would, again, be looking at the additional utility each of these platforms bring you guys, okay? So in addition to regular, like, impromptu talk in the kitchen, right, you have this extra utility available with a lot of these instant messaging platforms: video calling, regular calling, file sharing and storage, being able to have a longer history and being able to have it searchable. Right, this is all stuff, and it becomes kind of its own kind of useful tool in itself over time. So I know,
just to add to that, Adam, it's
yes,
probably important to kind of talk a little bit about when, right? When to use some of these tools, you know, video conferencing over messaging. But, you know, another one is like file sharing. If it's important, you know, instead of sharing a file, you know, via one of these instant messaging tools, you know, it should probably go through the normal channels. If you're trying to, you know, share a part file, for instance, an inventor part file, doesn't make sense to typically just drop it in here. You know, share it through a link to Fusion Teams, share it through a link. So, you know, share the right things at the right time. And then, you know, make sure, you know, again, you're using these for the right things, you know, call meetings. You need to take notes or something, or record the information in that meeting. It's going to be a conference call. If it's a real quick tap on the shoulder, hey, I need something, it's going to be instant messaging.
absolutely, yeah, no, definitely. So these all definitely have their context. You know, like Slack or Teams isn't necessarily meant to be a replacement for your regular drive storage. And yeah, it definitely has its context specifically for like impromptu, quick things. I use the screen sharing a lot just for, you know, getting help from someone else, for example, without having to schedule a 30-minute meeting with someone over Zoom. That's, again, kind of the point of instant messaging here, just so you have something quick, impromptu, not necessarily meant to be your complete solution via file sharing or replacing a part of your CAD workflow, for example. Thanks for that, Javier. Before I move on as well, I do recommend that you guys, if anything, make sure you have a singular solution that you guys settle on, because there's nothing worse than trying to switch to a new platform and there's still some stragglers on the previous platform. That's not really sure who's on who or who's available on what. So definitely, if you're considering switching at this point in time, just definitely make sure you have full commitment across the team so that you could, again, alleviate that kind of gap in communication. And the final point I have here is just I think more than anything, right, it's kind of an understated point, but instant messaging also helps kind of just bridge the isolation gap. Gets really lonely at home, you know, when you're all by yourself and you're eating Vienna sausages for breakfast. And it's good to have some kind of instant messaging just to not only communicate and collaborate well with your fellow people as you need to, but also just to stay a part of the community. And so you still have that social aspect, right? Like Javier was saying, we don't necessarily have to socially distance ourselves, but we do have to physically separate ourselves at this point in time. So whatever solutions you choose, definitely a lot of options and definitely a lot of things to consider. So back to you, Javier.
Yeah, no problem. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and summarize just before we, go to QA and make some announcements. I just want to summarize some of the things we took a look at here, right? We took a look at how we could access the software. That's the first thing we needed to be able to do, is access the tools that we need to be able to, work from home, and maybe leverage some of those home use benefits that we may not be so familiar with. So we took a look at that. We also took a look at some options on how to access the data that you guys typically access from day to day in the office. How do we do this remotely? We talked about the VPN as a solution, cloud solutions as well. Those are all viable ways to be able to look at those. And then we also took a look at, once you're on, how do we optimize this? How do we minimize the disruption that happens when we're working from home? Sometimes it's a connection issue. Sometimes, there's other issues, right? So that happens with Vault, Inventor, AutoCAD, whatever tool you're using. We've talked about some ways to address that. Okay. And last but not least, we want to make sure that you guys just have some, quick tips on how to maintain communication. So a lot of you guys maybe are already using some of these tools, but it's important to standardize on one. That's a big deal. Adam touched on that, and choosing the right tool that meets all your needs is also important. So we talked about some of those things. Hopefully you guys can leverage some of that information, and make sure that you guys can work effectively. So with that, I'll go to a couple announcements, and we'll start to gravitate towards the Q&A session here in just a moment. But I do want to announce one thing, and that's Autodesk is having Autodesk Answer Days. So Answer Days, if you haven't attended these are, if you've ever had a question that you've always wanted to ask, Autodesk puts these on from time to time. And specifically on March 24th, they're going to be addressing working remotely, okay? So it's free, it's easy, it's all day, and you can jump in and engage with the Autodesk community, peers, as well as some of the product designers, QA analysts, tech support or customer service, community managers that are available there. They'll be able to answer some of your questions. So take a look at the, I believe it's the chat. There's some links there for you guys to click on. If you guys wanted to sign up for that, that's another good resource for you guys to look at, okay? And in addition, before we jump on a QA, I just want to make sure that you guys give us some feedback. We've worked with you guys, some of you guys, for over 25 years. And we would love to see some feedback on what you guys need from us in order to be able to work a little bit easier or to do your jobs a little bit better. If we can help, we'd be more than happy to. It's part of what we do. So by all means, give us some of that feedback in either the chat or the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and turn it over here to Q&A in just a moment. So.
Yep, and there's one more link too that I just want to make note of too. If Stacy, you want to add that to the chat there. There's another webinar that we're doing with some of our friends at Autodesk. I know it got brought up in the Q&A about the retirement of network licenses. Some of those questions will be answered on this webinar that Autodesk is helping us with. That's happening, I believe, at the end of the month. Stacy just posted the link in the chat. So definitely keep an eye out for that and sign up if that's something that's relevant to you. All right, let's jump into questions. There are a lot. So
cool.
First and foremost, let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got. Jordan asks a question: has anyone experimented with relocating the local workspace folder to a OneDrive folder? I've had some experience with that and the customer doing something very similar. or they relocated their local workspace folder to a drive on the server. Essentially, that eliminates the benefit of having the local workspace tied to only yourself. If you're giving other people access to your local workspace, they can make edits. Essentially, it removes the idea of doing a file reservation by checking out the file. So if you want to be able to utilize some of the, I think, most core Vault functionality of having that check in and check out to a single person, I really don't see a reason why you would want to put it in a OneDrive location. I've only seen that cause problems for some of our customers. So if you have an idea of why you want to use it, Jordan, let us know, and we can go ahead and either say, yeah, go ahead and do that, or give you another option to be able to perform, what you want to end up getting to. All right. Eric asks, you talked a lot about Fusion and Fusion Team. Why not just use Fusion instead of Inventor? Adam, do you want to field that for us?
I'm sorry, you're reading the question from Eric, correct? So
Correct.
We talked a lot about Fusion, Fusion Teams. What if you don't use Fusion, just Autodesk Inventor? That's totally fine. Fusion Teams supports, again, all CAD files. I believe Nigel described as CAD aware specifically, so it doesn't have to be through Fusion specifically to get access to that stuff.
Yeah,
so
plenty of our
we're
customers
totally fine
who
if you don't use if you don't use Fusion, you could still use Fusion Teams to upload your stuff and manage those files.
Absolutely. It doesn't require you to use Fusion 360 as the CAD tool at all in the entire process. You can just use Inventor, Vault, Fusion Team to be able to get those files outside of the network, essentially. You don't need to touch Fusion 360 as a CAD tool at all in the process.
And I think that's where the confusion came between Fusion 360 and Fusion Teams. Fusion Teams is the file sharing solution, whereas Fusion 360 is that that design tool that's used for for freeform or for other functions as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and if it comes down to using Fusion 360 as a CAD modeling tool versus Inventor, it's most likely just going to be a matter of features, which one's going to meet your needs the best.
I think one of these, this question from Claudio, as far as Task Scheduler, just to reiterate the point, can you use Task Scheduler to ensure that each member of a team automatically checks a snapshot, for example, check in but keep checked out, in whatever they checked out that each day? So yeah, it's what we talked about earlier with Javier. When you're doing the check-in option through Task Scheduler, you still have the option to maintain the files reserved to you or the checked out to you. So, if you're going to keep working on those files the next day, of course, upload the snapshot. Don't lose any of the work, potentially lose any of the work that you've done all day. And then just have it checked out to you at the start of, the next day anyway. The one thing that we brought up is you would still want to schedule a get latest task as well. Just to make sure, again, if there are parts in your assembly or, any other related parts that have been worked on by somebody else, you want to make sure that you're capturing those changes and getting those files as well.
Yeah, and each user would have to, schedule or schedule their own. So I don't know off the top of my head any way of like forcing all the users to do that. Each one would have to, launch it and schedule it on their own. And they would probably want to schedule, it to check in their own unique file, project A versus my project B versus somebody else's project C.
Sure, if someone was savvy enough with Inventor, they might be able to come up with a way to automate that for everybody. But yeah, at this point, you just do the task scheduler settings on your own machine. So. And
also something to keep in mind, I know a lot of our customers like to turn off dialog boxes in Inventor for checking out, ensuring that, whenever they open up a file, it always checks out. If you're going to start working from home, this might cause a delay. So it'd be something to take a look at as well if, if you're moving towards the work from home environment.
Yep, and I think the word delay here is really important too, kind of ties into Joseph's question that we'll address here next. Is Joseph asking, what remote viewers have you found to be most effective? We're using remote PCs, but most of our team is having trouble with it. And I think it has to deal with this, and that's where you get those delays and speed, things like that. When it comes to the absolute most effective way to do it, I think the way that Hav explained is to be able to get all of your work, bring it locally, and then work on it offline is probably going to be the best in terms of performance, because you're not tied to the speed of your network to be able to remote into the PC at work or VPN into that network itself. I know that not everyone has gigabit Ethernet or gigabit internet. I don't. And so that might be the best way to go about doing that. If you absolutely need to work offline too, for speed's sake, you might see some performance issues if your computer at home is not as powerful as your computer at work. And that's something that a lot of people have talked to me about lately, is to be able to optimize the limited hardware they have at home. Maybe they don't have a big old Quadro card and a bunch of RAM on their home computer. So those people might have a better time remoting into their computer at work and utilizing the power and processing power of that actual PC via remote screen.
I'd like to mention something that Michael Lurch posted here. He mentioned that, he's having a good deal of his people work using VPN, and it's working, fairly well. But they did have to make some adjustments. So I don't know if he had to work with his IT to do this, but they had to slow a setting down within the VPN to like 56K for transmissions, so they wouldn't bog down the network. So what I see here is he must be working with somebody or with IT, or they're definitely communicating these issues. So definitely keep that up, and work with IT to maybe fine tune some of these tools. And I'm sure if they were to just use it initially, they might have given up if they didn't talk to their IT and fine tune it and tried something else. But this is probably going to meet their needs, and they won't have to go beyond VPN.
Yep. And remember, the network door is literally a door. If you have too many people try to go through the door at one time, might have some problems.
Yep.
So just keep that in mind. Like Michael did, there are some ways to be able to get more people through that door. To use an extended metaphor per se. So Paul is asking a question as well. What about third-party cloud options like OneDrive, Dropbox, or Box to utilize some of the auto-sync desktop options on those to update files automatically and communicating via Slack when those things are ready for editing? And like I had mentioned when we went through the Fusion team section, is those third-party cloud options like OneDrive and Dropbox are super awesome, except for the fact that they don't understand that CAD files are linked to each other. So if you're using AutoCAD and you just have DWGs with no XREFs and stuff like that, then maybe it'll work for you. But if you're using Inventor and you're loading full-blown Inventor assemblies up there, it can get really messy really fast. And that's just something that I've seen where you run into issues like, I can't find this file, and you have to resolve a bunch of file references. If your assembly's super huge, it'll be a problem.
Yeah, I think the other option there is Paula mentioned an autosync desktop option. You'd have to set up your project file to work off of that folder and then just have that auto sync up. But even then, again, those relationships that Nigel was talking about could be lost on the way up. But yeah, it starts getting complicated in a snowball fashion at that point.
Yep. Yeah, if you have a choice, definitely use something like Fusion Team. Or if you're going to do something like that, do pack and goes if you absolutely have to, and put it in OneDrive. All right, next question. For remote work, is there an advantage of having the content center stored in the vault?
So really the only reason that would be necessary is if the content center is customized. And we're talking about the libraries, the libraries, right? If it's customized, then it makes sense to put it on the vault. If it's not customized, it makes sense to use the desktop content, and that points to a location locally on your machine that's available, 24/7 without a vault login. So I'm pretty sure that's what you're asking about, and that would be the answer. It only makes sense if it's a custom library. Then you can control, well, who can customize it and who can't, and make sure that that's locked down.
Yeah, and that's an option in Inventor itself, whether you're looking towards Vault for the libraries or if you're looking locally. And if you're, working from home and without access through VPN or anything like that, you'd probably want to go ahead and switch that option to local libraries to view those standard ones.
Yeah, and then I guess, Jordan, that's a extension to that previous question about using OneDrive as your workspace folder. I could see that working. I could also see that causing issues in regards to setting that up. I think, Jordan, a better idea would be to utilize one of the techniques we recommended today, which is either remote into that workstation at your office if you can through something like a TeamViewer, or to VPN into the network to be able to access those files. If that's absolutely not possible, let us know. We can see what we can, what kind of workflow we can strum up for that particular situation.
Yeah, and to touch on the not possible thing, TeamViewer is third party. It requires it's a service essentially that you're going to be paying for, but there are IT policies out there that we've run into when we try to remote in with it that don't allow TeamViewer to be installed just because of some the IT policies themselves. So it's something you'd want to go ahead and work with your IT on. Michael Lurch over here confirmed with us that he worked with IT to look at the VPN settings. So it's definitely something you want to work with. I know us here, we all worked with Eddie, our IT, to get ourselves in a situation that we can work from home. So, it's definitely something you want to do before making the switch over by yourself.
Absolutely. Shout out to the Eddies of the world. I know they're probably up to their necks in requests for working from home. Absolutely, like our Eddie is. So Kimberly asked a really important question too. When setting up your home AutoCAD software, and I think this has to deal with AutoCAD, Revit, Inventor, everything, do you have to copy the support files over? So templates, fonts, plot styles, all of that to your local drive?
So I'll take that real quick. Not only do you have to copy them, because they're pointed to like a network location. I'm assuming if they're pointed to a network location, then you don't have access to that network location anymore. Then the answer is yes, and you also have to point your machine to the local location, right? The new location that you're putting on your C drive instead of a K drive or H drive. An option you might want to consider, and everybody might want to consider, if these files are static and you don't change them, you just utilize them to create a new file, or you point to them to access plot styles, but you're not editing them, is a feature in Windows called folder sync. And when you're connected to your network, it basically keeps a copy of it still mapped to the K drive or whatever drive you're using, and when you're disconnected, it still sees this K drive and only the files that you've synced, not the entire K drive. That works for some people. There's some instances where that doesn't work so well, but it's a Windows feature where you could sync a folder even when you're offline. I think it's sync offline or offline sync. You're going to want to look for that. And for static files that don't change very often, that will suffice most of the time.
Yep. Eric's asking, can you use Autodesk Drive to host shared libraries if you're not using Vault? I would zip them up.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one because however they're being shared, they should be shared the same way. In other words, like your project file should be pointing to the same location. And if your shared drive is mapped differently than mine, like mine points to like a user folder, and my user folder isn't the same as somebody else's, that could screw things up. So I would experiment with that. I would test it and just make sure it works the same from user to user to user. I would guess that there's probably some problems with that.
Yeah, there's definitely. I don't think per se they're problems, but I think they're things that you have to look out for, because it's not just a hit the button and start using it kind of deal. There's going to be some configuration, making sure that everyone's local is consistent. And I've seen a lot of our customers create documentation as to how their users should set up their computers, and have their users, self-service themselves by looking at that documentation, and then making sure those things work. So if you haven't gone to Vault yet, what's the best way to bring files remotely and then have them brought back to the server? It depends.
Okay, so yeah, I think one of the ways that we touched on is, you may not have Vault yet, but if you're able to use a solution where you're remoting into your desktop at work, the one that's in the office, then you don't have to worry about bringing them off site because
That would be ideal. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's as far as the best way, that's the ideal way that we think this could work. Again, we know that this isn't available to everyone. So other options would be, I think actually you would need to have a way to bring it back into the network anyway, like a remote access somewhere or someone on site, just because even if with Fusion Team, you can upload them from your local computer, but then someone would need to download them on the other end. Yeah. So again, remote access to your desktop computer or your on-site computer would be an ideal way to do this. And
we'll take a look at Robert's question here. Send files after hours, question mark. Once back online after working offline for security. So yeah, that's the workflow that Hob went through, is to be able to send files back in after hours.
Yeah, and it's I'm not sure about the security part. I to be honest with you, I wasn't thinking about security. I was thinking about efficiency. Yeah, and let the connectivity happen, because you're waiting. Let the waiting happen when you're offline. Let the machine sit there and wait, trying to check in these files for 30 minutes or so, while you're watching Netflix after hours, or something. By the way, that's going to interfere with the connectivity, but let it do the work while you're gone. That's the main thing.
Yep.
Yeah, you're still locking up your desktop while you're away. If you're concerned with your coworkers, aka your 4-year-olds that are walking around, you still want to lock your computer. You still want to practice the same policies that you would if you were in the office, but you're letting the computer itself do the work for you.
There you go.
Well, Eric actually sent it. He's like, let your computer do the work while you're drinking a beer or 3.
Yeah, but not during off hours. That's not like before, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's not digress.
Absolutely. But yeah, so essentially, yeah, you just want to be as efficient as possible in a time where you can't be super efficient, I guess would be the you want to optimize the situation that you're in. And I think that while all of us are working remotely, we still want to get as much work done as possible. Maybe our capacity is not at 100%, but utilizing some of the things that we went over today will get us to that 90%, 95%, because we can't connect to, per se, the Vault directly from our computers here at home, if that's the case that you're in. So that's everything that we have for questions for everyone. I definitely appreciate everyone for joining us today. I appreciate the team that we have online for putting this together on such short notice. I know that the times are not ideal, and we'd rather be, interacting in the office, working, but hopefully we gave everyone some information that helps you all work from home or from your remote office, wherever that may be, a little bit better than going in blind. So any last words from anyone here on the line?
Thanks, Nigel, for keeping this consistent throughout and being a host of AVA, even when we're not in the office. So thank you.
Studio. So yeah, just an announce on that too is just because I'm here at my house doesn't mean AVA is going to stop. We'll still be doing them every week. You'll probably see me in this room for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully it ends pretty soon and we can go back into the office. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop helping you. So if you have any questions, definitely shoot us emails, give us phone calls. We're more than happy to field any more questions you guys have. And stay safe, everyone. I think we're good.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.